listening to the Things You Don't Hear in Church podcast, a show where your hosts, Darian and Ethan, discuss the controversial topics often avoided by the church. They also discuss culture, society, and everyday goofs. And now, Darian and Ethan.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome back to the show, everybody listening and watching.
Yes.
Our family.
We hope you all had a great week.
Yep.
Today's a super exciting holiday.
Yeah.
I think either yesterday or today, Yom Kippur.
Yep.
Shout out to all our Jews out there. We don't know what that means.
Yep.
It's a feast. I think it's a new year. Not really sure. Do you know anything about it?
Happy birthday, Jesus.
That's in April. Whatever. We can talk about that, the birth of
Just
Jesus.
kidding, I know what it is, but I don't feel like talking about. I want to say thank you so much to the random person that supported us on our podcast. We now have 3 financial supporters of the podcast. Shout out to you. We don't know who you are because it said anonymous. If you want us to know who you are, DM us.
Yeah, DM us.
Yes.
Let
we
us
love
know.
you so much.
We're so grateful. We're so excited.
Yeah. Oh, actually, all the people who do support us, anybody who does want to support us, you should DM us because we're creating stickers tonight. We already created the art that we want to do, refined it a little bit, and we're going to be ordering them really soon, and we're going to send them out to all our supporters and anybody who wants to support us, or anybody who wants to buy a sticker or just wants a sticker, they can contact us. It'll be a sticker promoting the podcast. You can put them all over the place, show your friends, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'll put one on my water bottle. It'll be awesome.
Put one on here, and you'll see it also in all the other stickers.
Yep.
But yeah, so this week, man, you've been really excited and into tattoos lately.
Yeah, almost every day I've thought about like how I want a tattoo. And I don't know, like even wearing a hat right now, because I'm wearing a hat for everybody watching the video, I just feel so much more like I want tattoos for some reason. And this is the first day I've worn a hat in a long time, but I just feel like I want like a sleeve on my left arm super bad.
Yeah, we were getting ready for the show and Derry looks in the camera and he's like, man, I should have a sleeve right here.
The only thing that's stopping me is there's so much money.
Yep.
Like my whole life I've wanted a sleeve on my right leg and my left arm.
It'd be cool to have like, you get super buff and had some tattoos that came up to your neck. If you knew you'd be financially stable for the rest of your life and never had to get a job anywhere. It'd be like really awesome to have some like crazy tattoos up here.
What kind of tattoos you get on your neck though? I feel like that's a very specific kind of tattoo you got to get.
I have no idea. I don't have tattoos. I don't know what the protocol for that is. The prerequisite to neck tattoos.
You got to get the Christian girl cross behind the ear tattoo.
Oh gosh, no.
It's always the behind the ear. Not making fun of anybody, but kind of am.
Kind of making fun of you.
It's always either, if you see the video, right there on the wrist, not centered on the wrist, but right there. You know, like Michigan hand is right there, and then it's either that or behind the ear.
Or what's super classic and what a lot of people do, super cliche and nerdy, they get like Hebrew written down their ankle.
Oh yeah, yeah. Only nerds do that.
Derry has that.
Yeah. I saw a youth pastor me a while ago, and it was like the exact same tattoo in the exact same spot.
Really?
I was like, oh, I guess I know what I'm doing when I'm older.
That's so funny. Oh, man. That's great.
Yes. I read Hebrew fluently.
Fluently.
Yeah.
You don't speak English fluently.
I've been so busy studying Hebrew, I now slur my English.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
You've been hard at work.
Yeah, hard at work.
In the office.
Yeah.
Making up your own job.
Yep.
That's fun.
Yeah.
I don't know how many hours I logged last week in Genesis.
Because you're in the BCC, studying the Bible every day?
Yeah. It was, I'd probably average like 7 a.m. I'd start my day, and I would be done around like 10 p.m. And I maybe had like 3 hours of breaks in there.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was just like studying, and I was just like, I'm so tired.
And you're doing Deuteronomy this week, right?
Deuteronomy memes.
Nice.
That's a good Instagram page if you like
Shout
memes.
out.
Go there. They do not pay us. Although if you hear about us and you want to pay us, we will take it.
Yes.
But yeah, Deuteronomy and the whole background of the Torah, super fun. So once I'm done with this, I'm going to go back to studying Deuteronomy.
Nice.
Basically, what I'm telling you is, and I'm an expert in the Bible now, I know everything you can ever ask about the Hebrew culture. And so with that, Derry's going to test me.
What's Yom Kippur?
Yom Kippur is a festival celebrated by the Jews and the Hebrews where you repent and celebrate, rejoice for the next week. And I think it's the new year. I'm pretty sure it's the new year. We can say that. And because I said I think, and someone can let us know We could look it up here, but it's going to take too long to do that.
I don't know if it's the new year, but I know it's like the holiest day of the year.
Really? Let's look up what is
Check your facts.
Yom Kippur 2020.
Ooh.
It
This is
does
going to take
not-
too long.
Yeah, it doesn't
There's no
tell us.
simple explanation.
Oh, here we go. Nope, it ends September. It ends tomorrow evening. That's a fact of
Whatever.
that day.
No, today. This evening.
Today's the 28th.
Yeah, it's Monday.
Well, then it just ended because it says evening.
Oops.
I'm a liar.
Wow, you're a liar, dude.
All right, no, what we're actually talking about today. I posed a question on Facebook last week that I did not think was going to generate as much heat as it did. And what happened is I posed this question. I thought, no one probably actually has opinions about this, but I'm going to see what happens.
Yeah.
And then Derry comes to me a half hour after I posted. He's like, bro, your comments are blowing up. Because I don't have my notifications on. And Derry just happened to be on Facebook. And I was like, really? What? So I checked. And there's paragraphs being written. I mean, like, paragraphs. And then paragraphs and responses to paragraphs. And all that jazz. And I was like, guys, I didn't know this was such a hot topic. So I
I didn't
immediately
know you cared.
Yeah, you guys care about this? So I immediately texted Derry. I was like, bro, we got to do this show on this. This has to be your response. So for everyone on my Facebook, this is my official response to the question I posed. Is the Genesis 1 creation accounts, just Genesis 1, a literal story, or...
That isn't what you said on Facebook, though, was it? Like,
I can read the exact...
I think it was just like, is Genesis literal?
I said Genesis
Something
1
like that.
specifically.
Oh, really?
I like made sure because I knew people would get misunderstood there.
Yeah.
But yeah, is Genesis 1 a literal account of creation, or is it symbolic?
Yeah.
That's the basis of what I asked, and I realized afterwards, wow, there's a lot of miscommunication here. I don't think people are necessarily getting what I was... Like, I don't think... where's all my things? It messed up. Whatever. I was on Facebook.
Well, I think
Awkward.
the Bible is a series of stories, the metaphorical stories that give us life lessons on how to live a good moral life here on this earth.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong.
Literally everything in there is figurative. Not figurative.
No, it's not figurative.
Literally.
The whole Bible is just metaphorical.
Everything's literal.
I wonder what should be a better life if you believed the whole entire Bible is literal or the whole entire Bible is
Probably figurative.
It's
Figurative
figurative.
would be way better to live. Because if you think it's literal, there's like you will have to then kill people because they do things. Because
If you
they're
think
like,
it's literal?
this law is literal, but then you don't realize that that's contextual to the time, and you won't ever say like, oh yeah, it's not literal now, but it was back then, right? And then you're gonna be taking all
like
those
you
things.
discount all literary styles, you mean, and you just take all of the words as literal?
Yeah. So like. Then you'd be like, I don't know. There's a lot. Like you'd be
But
like
can you
Revelation would be very
Can
confusing.
you take into account historical context? Like say we don't follow
the Torah anymore?
Yeah, we don't follow the Torah anymore. Would we have to, or we have to take that as literal for us still?
I would assume
but
if
I think you could take the Bible literally still and still know we don't have
That
to
makes
follow
sense.
the
Yeah,
Torah.
I could concede that. Yeah, you can. You don't have to do that. But then it's like if you take it completely literal, like all of Revelation is going to be confusing. Now there is parts of Revelation that are literal.
that's true.
There's parts that's imagery. Proverbs would be very confusing because it says if you live a good moral life, you'll get rich, basically.
Yeah.
And that just means like that's just a general rule of life that if you're disciplined and do well, you'll get that back. But it's not like always, and that's
Yeah.
not how Proverbs is supposed to be understood.
What would be the downfalls of thinking the whole Bible is figurative, or like
You
Symbolism.
might not actually think you need Jesus as a savior.
symbolic?
Because you'd be like,
Why?
oh, Jesus isn't actually saved. Jesus is a figure of when you do a good have a good lifestyle, then you'll be saved.
Maybe.
It doesn't actually mean to put on the full armor of God in any spiritual sense. He just means to be aware of evil things.
But I think
bad
even if you
things.
think it didn't happen and it's just figurative, you'd still have to believe in a God. You'd still have to believe that God's character, based off of the stories, or
Right.
like the symbolic stories that would be in the
I
Bible,
guess you could be a Christian
would still be a God that wants to sacrifice and save his
Right. 'Cause
metaphorical children.
That's kind of what classical theism does. Classical
Yeah, a little
theism
bit.
has this idea where like God is not a personal God. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever the Bible says he has wrath or he was grieved or he was angry, it's not that God actually experienced those emotions. It's they would say that that's just symbolic. Like God is just having it written in a way that humans can understand who he is, but he isn't capable of experiencing emotions because he's the explanation of all emotions. Now,
Interesting.
classical theism is super confusing, and that's just a puddle
Yes,
of a sea.
very confusing.
That's like one drop of a whole ocean of things we can get into. Don't take this out of context in the future and splice it together and say that's what I said about God. That is not true.
Yeah.
Disclaimer.
Oh, and earlier I was joking when I said the whole Bible is
we don't
is
think
not literal,
we don't
or
think,
is literal. It's literal and not literal. I mean, recognizing.
we know the Bible's literal at some points and symbolic and figurative in other points,
Yes.
and a lot of it's poetry.
Just like most books.
Yeah, well, not science books.
Well,
Those are not figurative at all.
sometimes they are. They tell a joke in the book. Sometimes.
Have you ever read a science book that tells a joke?
Yes, many.
Makes one of us.
Many.
How many science books have you read?
I went to college.
But how many science books did you read in college?
I read all of them 0 times, or the whole thing 0 times. But I read probably like 5 or 6.
Okay. But yeah, so
Just in college, not in high school too, because that'd be more.
yeah. Is Genesis 1 a literal account of creation? That's what we're discussing today.
Oh my gosh, more than 6. I'm sorry. I probably read like 12 or more. My bad. Okay.
Genesis 1.
Yeah, past the science books. And what did you just say? Because I was thinking.
I said we are discussing, is Genesis 1 a literal account of creation, or is it a symbolic account just explaining that God created?
Yeah, that'd be good. But
so
to derail this again, one time, sometime we should do a show. We should do a show where at the very beginning we make false statements and we let everybody know they're false statements, but both of us make one
And we
in
defend it.
opposition to each other, and we fight for our false statement. So like, for instance, what we just said, like, what if I think the whole Bible is symbolic and you think the whole Bible is literal, and we come to the show and we say these are both not true, but we've done like our research and we argue for those points
That
the
would be
whole
fun.
show.
That'd
be
be
very
real fun.
interesting.
I love pointless arguments.
Yeah, me
That's
too.
what I live for.
It's so comical.
I've gotten serious debates about which superheroes are better and who would win a fight.
Yeah.
Flash beats Superman. I don't care.
Yeah, if Flash has his legitimate powers, he beats Superman.
Yeah, thank you. One time I had a legit, like, very intense conversation with a friend, and then at like 11:30 at night, he texts me. We were in YWAM together, so we're in the same room, and he just texts me from across the room a link why Superman beats Flash. And I started laughing. I was like, bro, you're so petty, bro. Go to sleep.
You can make some good arguments.
Go to sleep,
ways.
man. But it was just
All
funny.
right, sorry to derail you. Let's get back to what we're talking about. Why
Yeah, Genesis
Genesis
1.
is only figurative.
I guess we know your hand.
Why Genesis is completely literal.
So Genesis 1, for the people who have not either read it or
Oh
new to
wait,
Christianity.
I've read 13 science books because Genesis 1 is a literal science book.
Oh my gosh.
So that's 13. So keep going.
It's a chapter of a book.
Yeah, it's a
I guess-
book.
yeah. Okay, so basically, if you're new to Christianity, you don't know a lot about Genesis 1, it's the account of creation, or how the people of God, the Israelites,
In
us
the
as
beginning,
Christians.
God created the heavens and the earth.
Yeah.
And earth without form and void.
He
Darkness
memorized
was
the
on
whole thing.
face of the deep. Yeah, keep going.
So how it's about how God created the universe and the world and humanity and the order of creation. And there's a lot in there. It's like blowing my mind. But we're going to talk about, now, was it a literal 7 days? Or was it not? What parts can we take literally? What parts are symbolic?
Yeah.
How does this work? Because a lot of people, one person said, if it is not taken literally, it discounts the entire canon.
Yes.
Which is a very bold claim. I talked to them individually, and I said, I don't agree with you. But they're one of my good friends.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so we had a good conversation about it. I was like, I think that's just a bold claim to say that all of canon is excluded or cannot be trusted if Genesis 1's not literal. So we're going to talk about that, hash that out,
Yeah.
discuss it. We don't know how long this show is going to be.
Yeah, and quick shout out to my dad before we start this. He's probably the person who knows the most about this topic out of anybody I know, because he studies it for fun every day of his life, at least every day I've known him. Don't listen to the rest of this podcast. You can just turn it off right now, so I'm not an embarrassment to you.
Well, I just want to say, Mr. Brooks, I learned about this view last week and had a few conversations and did a little bit of reading. So I'm probably just as qualified to talk about it as you are.
Yes.
And I hope you know me well enough to know I'm joking. I've met you once, twice. Yeah,
Maybe
so
3
we're,
times.
what's 3?
I don't know.
No, just
Okay,
he came to us.
we're talking about Genesis.
It's a funny evening. Just keep getting off track. Okay, should we read the whole thing, or is that too much?
Yeah, let's read it.
Okay.
It's not very long.
Okay, where's Google? Google, and then you go to your Bible software.
To the very
You
beginning. I can just go to
use-
mine.
You got it?
I mean, I don't got it, but I can get there faster than you
Oh, I
can.
bet, bro. Your data sucks today. Well, I'm already there.
Yeah, well, I'm not.
So this is the NASB, New American Standard Bible. And we're just going to read the entire thing all the way through so you can get an understanding of what it says. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening, and there was morning one day. Then God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." God made the expanse that separated the waters which were below the expanse and the waters which were above the expanse. And it was so. God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening, and there was morning a second day. Then God said, "Let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and gathered the waters he called sea. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, fruit trees on the earth bearing fruit after their own kind, seeds in them," and it was so. Then the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seeds after their kind, and trees bearing fruit with their seeds in them after their kind, and God saw that it was good. There was evening and morning a third day. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate day from night, and let them be signs for seasons and for days and years. Let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He made the stars also. God placed them in the expanse of the heavens, God placed them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on earth and to govern the day and the night. And God separated the light from the darkness, and God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning a fourth day. Then God said, let the waters teem, the swarms of living creatures. Let the birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the heavens." And God created the sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarmed after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the waters and the sea, and let the birds multiply on the earth." There was evening and there was morning a fifth day. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth its creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things and beasts of the earth after their kind." And it was so. God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after its kind, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make man in our own image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle of all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." God created man in his own image. The image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Then God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed. It shall be food for you. And to every beast of the earth, and every bird of the sky, and to every living thing that moves on earth which has life, I have given every green plant for food, plant for food," and it was so. God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and morning a sixth day. That's the end of it.
Yeah.
With a few mess ups.
No rest.
Okay, I just talked a lot. I want to hear your thoughts. You take over because I don't want to talk right now.
That's the Bible. We just read it. Yeah, it's very interesting. So you could study this for your whole entire life. You know,
just this chapter.
Yeah, there's thesis papers upon thesis papers upon thesis papers written about just this chapter. Probably just the first verse.
Right. When I was doing my interpretations for this, I got "in the beginning God," and I was like, stop right there.
Yeah.
You have so much to talk about with just "in the beginning God."
Yeah. There's many theological stances you can take from just this chapter alone that it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Even just the scientific implications of presupposing things and putting stuff together is very, very interesting.
Yeah. There's ideas out there that God, so there's Christians out there who believe in the Big Bang and believe in macroevolution, right? So they say, okay, God created, there was an explosion, and then he let creation just do its thing, and then he had his people compile it in a way that we would understand.
Yeah.
That's a version of it. There's other people who say it's all literal, God, exactly how it's written, it's literally how it happened. God spoke, and it was so. God spoke, and it was so.
Right.
And there's probably people in between who are like, oh, Earth was very old for billions of years, and then God put life on it after it's formed and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because of how long it takes planets to form and stuff like that.
Do you wanna tell the people what kind of literary style it was before we kind of start talking about it?
Yeah. So there's a couple different literary styles.
And maybe explain just like what a literary style is first.
Yeah, literary style is style of writing to communicate a certain thing. So we have like allegorical, there's where it's a story about something to convey a message. There's apocalyptic, which means it's just like written a certain way to convey like apocalypse, meaning it's like revelation if you know that. There's historical narrative, where it's just telling what happened as the events follow. That'd be more like a history book. Yeah. It has no moral position. It just says, here's what happened. And it's not saying anything was good or bad. It's just how it happened. Right. And then there's poetic literature. There's Hebrew poetic literature, which is, I'm pretty sure, what the first chapter is about, depending on what translation you use. Some of it show it poetry. Some of it show it as just narrative. Yeah. So I would assume it could be considered both. Yeah. But depending on how you decide to look at it, matters for how you understand it as literary or symbolic. Yeah. So do you have any information, anything you want to add to the literary styles?
I mean, you just write, you'd think back, if you're trying to think about this concept of literary styles. Every book of the Bible is written in one or more of these literary styles. And it's just like reading a different book, right? Like if you're going to read a book about poetry, there would be, it would be written in a style of poetry, right? Say you're going to read a book that's critiquing poetry or talking about poetry, it's probably going to have more than just the poetic style of writing. It'll probably also have a narrative style and maybe even a historic like style and also a poetic style, right? It'll have all three of those. And so you can tell from the Bible that there's written in it different styles.
Right. And that's like really important to remember, even in just reading the Bible as a general rule of thumb, is like, because we know this in our culture. There's novels that we read that we know are fiction. Yeah. Right? And then there's blogs we read that we know are opinion. Then there's like news journals that we read that are supposed to be facts, but nowadays they're more often opinion. But there's like supposed to be unbiased. And then there's like history books that are just basically telling you parts of history. Right. And so we have different historical or different literary styles in our culture today. It's the same for the Hebrews back then. They weren't a dumb people either. Right. You know, they were an educated civilization. Yeah. We think that people back then were they built the Egyptians built the pyramids. Yeah, probably. And the Hebrews, unless it's aliens, and the Hebrews were like in that area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think aliens built the pyramids?
No.
They did. They definitely did.
So another important thing to know just about this whole topic in general of Genesis is literal or figurative. Yeah. It's been going on forever, this debate, right?
This conversation.
Yeah. Augustine, like the second church father, one of the original ones after Origen, was one of the first people to bring up that it could be figurative, but it wasn't really taken super seriously. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people took it seriously, but like in the mainstream, wasn't taken super seriously until like around the scientific revolution, like around the 1800s, like around that time, right? When people started to think about evolution and all those kinds of things and trying to figure it in, fit it in with the biblical narrative and stuff like that, right? And so that's when it started to become popular more of trying to figure out, well, what does this actually say? What does this mean? Was it 24 actual days? Was it not?
Well, 24-hour days.
Oh, yeah, sorry. 24-hour days. Not 24 days. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to say.
There's a lot to get into, and so we're going to get into it real quick after this break.
All right, I hope you all got your goldfish and juice and you're sitting back down listening. Welcome back.
Hello.
Sunday school reference.
I definitely filled up my coffee. Nice. Not that I need it, because I'm awake and it's 6:45 p.m. I'll be up till midnight. But that doesn't matter to you. You want to know about Genesis 1.
Yes.
All right, so there's a couple things to take into consideration as we study out this book, right? Okay, so what I want to talk about first is that this literary style was written in a way purposely to convey messages to the Israelite people, because the people who would have been reading this, to give you some perspective, they were Hebrew Israelites from the same people group. I don't know why I said the same name. Yeah. But who had just come out of 400 years of slavery to Egypt, right? So culturally, these are Egyptian people, even though ethnically they're Hebrew, and they have been surrounded with pagan worship for the last 400 years of their life. Knowing, and you can assume that because it's an oral culture, that they have stories of how God had created. That's probably how we have the Genesis story, is like they had all these oral traditions of telling stories passed down.
Yeah, it was a normal style of communication.
Yeah, so they knew historically what they believed as Hebrews, but they were surrounded by cultures that disagreed with them. And so what happens is like the other cultures around them, like such as the Egyptians, they also had their creation stories. And they would say like, oh, this god had these kids. And I think for the Egyptians specifically, his kids were in love and always wanted to have sex. So the dad,
Classic
the
God
dad
story.
was like, no, and he like separated them. So one became ground and one became sky and he became air.
Interesting.
And that's how the Egyptians understood how everything came to be.
Okay.
And then there was this like one god who was a sun who when the sun set, they believed that he was having a fight with this other god. And then every
Whoa.
morning he was reborn.
Science, am I right?
Right? Yeah. And so that's how they just understood the world. And so for the Hebrews growing up, they're just like, we got to figure out ways to understand this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what's interesting about the Genesis 1 account is that it has words such as like separated. When it says like God separated the water from above, the water below, they would have known that meant like, oh, like just like the Egyptian God separated his kids from like having sex and it became the water below and water above. It's like, oh no, but Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, just separated it, and he's the creator, right? And it says his spirit was hovering over the water. Water in that mindset was like something that could not be tamed, because there was like seas that had storms, and they didn't have any explanation as to how. So they're like, oh my gosh, the gods don't mess with the waters because it's never calm. It's unpredictable. So we just think that there's no gods there. So by God saying his spirit hovers over the water, God is saying, I'm in control of the chaos.
Yeah.
Like you think that it's uncontrollable, but I actually have authority over it, and I separate it, and I command it.
That's
right?
cool.
So the fact that God's commanding the waters to be separated is like such a flex for the Hebrews to say like, yeah, our God controls the water. You know, that's a really big deal. And also the numerology is super important, because 7 is the number of completion in Hebrew writing and other literary styles. And so the fact that God created in 7 days, if you keep reading it into we only got to 6 days in Genesis 1, but Genesis 2 continues, and it says on the 7th day God rested. So the 7 days would have communicated that this was God's doing, and he made it complete.
Yeah.
Right? And then there's a context there in the 2nd chapter also where it mentions creation of man, that says God created them in his image he created them. He created them male and female, which is 3 instances, one after another, about God creating people. And 3 represented like God doing something, or a transformation by God, or anything that had to do with 3 was like instituted by God.
Yeah.
So it's super interesting in that. And that's a whole message in itself, is that there's 3 times repeated the word created and the idea of image when it's God creating man. So it's like your identity was created to be in the image of God, and that was God's plan. So that's what separates in the Hebrews' mind. They're like, this is why we're different than the animals, because God created us in his image, and that establishes true identity when you know yourself as God's creation to be loved. Right?
Yeah.
So that's a whole big thing that helps out with identity issues if you needed that. But basically, there's so much that goes on. So like, what do you think? What are your thoughts hearing that, and like taking the context, all that like background of how the Hebrews wrote and understood things? What does that mean for how we understand it today?
Yeah, I just think it's so funny. I've had 1.5 billion debates about this topic over the years. And it's always the exact same arguments over and over and over. And it's all very like philosophical and not very like, I studied the book, like historical background, and this is what this meant kind of thing, right?
Right.
And people don't bring that into the conversation a lot, when it's actually very important, like who it's being written to and stuff.
Right.
And much less like the philosophy of like, what does this word day mean?
Right.
And like that kind of stuff, which we'll get into in a second.
And yeah, I got like, that's what really messed me up, is I was like thinking about the philosophical side of how I would understand God. And I'm like, wait, when I would assume when God creates, it just happens, right?
Yeah.
And everything is.
Yeah.
Because he isn't bound by time. But I'm like, okay, how much is my understanding becoming philosophical and not actually bound by the Bible?
Yeah.
But I interrupted.
Which philosophy is still created by God and can still be used.
Yeah, philosophy
well.
is good, but certain philosophies are of man and to be ignored.
Yeah.
If Paul
Absolutely.
says so.
It is not God.
Yeah. So, what do you think?
About the whole topic?
Yeah. Do you think it's literary? Do you think it's figurative?
Let's get into it a little more. Do you have anything else you want to go through before we actually start talking about the days and stuff like that?
Not currently, but if you got things you want to bring up.
I mean, I can talk about the days a little bit.
Do it.
It's funny that we talked about Yom Kippur at the beginning, because Yom is the word for day, and it just means day. I don't know what Kippur means, but
Kippur is the last name of one of the writers for The Office.
yeah, Kelly Kapoor, yeah. So it's the day of Kelly Kapoor.
It's her birthday.
Yeah, that's
Which
what.
everyone
That makes
missed.
so much more sense to me now.
But yeah, that's why she was so mad when no one said happy birthday to her.
Dang.
Oh, jeez.
Yom
We're
Kippur.
off topic.
So that Kapoor, or not Kapoor, Yom. Yom is a name for the word day. It's the word day in Hebrew. And it's mentioned a ton, right? Especially in just the first chapter. I think in Genesis it's mentioned like 400 so times, like 410 times. And almost every single one of those times, it does mean an actual 24 hour period, right? But there are genuine times when it doesn't mean a genuine 24-hour period, right? And that definition of it is usually based on the circumstances around the word being used, right? Just like most words in general, they mean whatever the context of the sentence is,
Right.
or gives it meaning,
Right. You need context clues.
Yeah,
This
exactly.
is 6th grade English.
Yeah. And so we can, by reading like even extra biblical writings, we can figure out what that word means, and that sometimes Yom can mean a 24-hour period, but can also mean even a 12-hour period, right? Because sometimes in the Jewish culture, day was just like when there was light outside, and even there would still be light outside, but like when it's getting dark, it would be like when the sun comes up, and kind of like when the sun starts going down, would be like the day kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it can mean almost 3 different things, right? 12 hours, 24 hours, or just a certain amount of time, right? That's given, like almost like a figure of speech. Like if I say, this is going to take me all day, right? I don't mean like 12 hours. I don't mean 24 hours. Like, I just mean this is going to take me a long time.
A long time, right.
You know what I mean? And so, anything you want to say on that topic?
I think it's a really good point to make because then it does kind of, when you analyze Genesis 1, you see, okay, this day, how it's being used, how it's understood. You need to have those other options to understand it, to look at it from all angles. And I do think that, I think that it matters to have truth, but to have truth and find truth, you need to challenge it and look for from all angles. So that's good information. I didn't know like that it was used that many times, or that Yom meant day.
Yeah, it's used a lot.
That's really informative.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't have too much information I guess I want to add other than like, let's get into, unless you have more you want to talk about, but I would love to get into like what we think about it.
Yeah. I honestly don't know 100% what I think about it. Like I could be convinced today of the other,
right,
or the antithesis of what I already think. Right now, if you were to ask me, I would say I don't think it's an actual 24 days.
Hours.
Yeah, 24 hours. I also don't think it's a literal 24 days, but I do think it's literal 24 hours, which is what I was trying to say. Just kidding, I don't.
Wait, so you don't think it's a 24 hour?
I don't think it's 24 hours,
okay.
But I could be convinced otherwise.
Right.
I don't think it's that big of a deal. Clenching our teeth.
Oh, you better be careful, man.
Oh,
so
I think that it's a big deal for some people when you're trying to prove a worldview, right?
Right.
So I think if you're trying to reinforce your belief in not believing in macroevolution or believing in macroevolution, it becomes a really big deal for you. If you don't care, which I do care,
right?
But if you don't care, it doesn't matter that much. If you do care, it still doesn't matter that much because you can disprove macroevolution
other ways
way easier than, like, I'm not gonna walk up to someone who believes in macroevolution and be like, well, God said it was 24 hours, and we start having it like
they probably just don't believe in God in general.
Yeah, we'll start like actually debating evolution, right?
Which would be like, you won't even be debating evolution; you'll be debating the existence of God. Like most people who believe in macroevolution, usually, I would assume, by and large, you can assume they're not really a Christian. Now there are Christians who believe in macroevolution. That's fine. I have no problem with that.
Yeah,
but you have my permission to think that way. Is what I'm saying. Just kidding. But by and large, I would say people who hold to the idea of evolution most likely are not looking at the world through a biblical worldview.
Yeah, and I don't believe in macroevolution, which is why I think it's literal 24 hours.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Okay. So you just don't care.
Right. No, I do care. I think that it is not a little 24 hours, and
it's not macro.
What?
It's not 24 hours literally, and it's also not macro.
Yes. Both of those things.
Okay.
And I'm gonna state the classic, like, noob argument for it not being 24 hours, the one that everybody always talks about whenever this debate is brought up, which we can talk about and dissect a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's that, I mean, the cycle of 24-hour days dictated by the moon and the sun doesn't come into existence until day 3.
Something like that.
So I mean, you could still say, I mean, I think the strongest argument against that argument is that whenever the word yom is used, it's usually followed, like, it would say day, and then it would say a cap on it being a day and a night at the end of it, right? So I think the strongest case for saying it's a literal 24-hour day is saying if we're going to define words by the sentence they're in, we have to always do that, right? If that's how we're going to do it, we always have to stick to it, right? And so there's kind of two different contexts. There's the scientific context of the moon and the sun and stuff, like that's not instituted. The day, like the scientific day, the way we calculate 24-hour days, isn't instituted until the third day. But the sentence structure is still set up by, it says the word yom, which means day, which could be one of three meanings. Yeah. And then at the end of the sentence, it says, and the evening and the morning was the something day, right? And so, what's the something yom? So you could make an argument that because it's given capstones of the evening and the morning was the day, that it's actually talking about either a 24-hour period or a 12-hour period and not the large period of time, right? Now, I would say a counter to that, even just thinking now, could be the style that this is written in, right? It could be that
it's a good thing to bring
if you don't think that it's literal, which some people would argue that this is just a literal style, but other Bible scholars would say that it's, what did you call it?
Hebrew poetry.
Hebrew poetry, okay.
Hebraic, if
Hebraic
you want
poetry.
to be fancy.
Yeah, that's what I thought you said. A lot of people would argue that it's Hebraic poetry, at least parts of it. And you could say that God is using a poetic style. That's why he uses capstones of in the evening and the morning were the first day, right? To create a consistency of a poem, which we see over and over throughout poetry, right? Yeah, that would also be a valid argument, I would say. Yeah. So I would say I land more on the side of them not being 24-hour days just because of the scientific stance on it more, because it's not until the third day that those are created. I don't think that I change almost any of my other theology based off of that opinion. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to not have that change.
Yeah. So I thought about it quite a bit, but I don't think, at least I've thought about what would change, and I don't think a lot changes by me having that opinion of it not being 24-hour days. Now, the implications of that for other people could be massive. Right? But for myself, nothing really changes, right? And so I would say to someone that I was telling my opinion about, I would say, now what do you start to believe based off of that opinion I have? Because that could be where it gets dicey. Yeah. But what do you think about it?
I have been thinking about this for so long because there's like people I respect on both sides of the argument are giving really good reasons. Yeah. On the Facebook post, I'm like, okay, you're one of my closest friends. You're saying this.
Yeah. And I trust you.
And you're in seminary right now, and I've sat under your teachings, and you're really smart too, and you're a genius too, and you're also making good points. And I'm just kind of sitting there like, I love this conversation, and I have refused to plant my flag in any specific camp so far. Maybe up until maybe now, or I think I found a new territory to land in that I think is okay.
It's all figurative, and God didn't actually create the world.
And people might be like, you can't think this way, but I will just tell them, yes, I can. Like one time I had a conversation with the pastor, and I said, I think I'm not going to be, I was like, I think I'm an Arminian, but I think I believe in covenantal theology. And covenantal is like a Calvinist doctrine, and Arminian's opposite of Calvinist. And this guy's like, you can't do that. And I said, no, but I can. I said, that's what I do.
No, listen, I just put a sentence together. That means I did.
Yeah. I was like, no, but that's exactly what I think. And he's like, you can't have both. I was like, but I do. I don't. I'm sorry. I don't. Sorry, 2,000 years of church history. I just decided to not care. But no, getting back to the topic. So on one hand, it seems really good evidence to me to promote the 7-day literal count and whatnot. Definitely. Would be that God said he rested on the seventh day. Yeah. That alone makes me think, okay, like that gives reason to why we would Sabbath, because God Sabbath on the seventh, right? And then I think, but could God have just decided to write this in such a way and then add that seventh day to give us rest, to promote us, and just have like, it's not an actual thing, it's just an arbitrary thing that God decided that humans needed? Yeah. I doubt that. I think God takes more time and consideration into the things he does. I don't think it's so much arbitrary. But what really gets me to think that it's not literary is the fact of like the style of writing and the message it conveys to the people.
Yeah.
Right? Because the people coming out of Egypt are former slaves who not only know, but they're hugely influenced by pagan worship. And it's so easy for them to revert to. We see that when they build a golden calf in Exodus, and Aaron says, this is the God who brought you out of Egypt. And the word there is like Yahweh. He's like, this is Yahweh. And it's like he builds an idol.
Yeah.
And God's like, don't do that. That's not how you worship me. So they had to like unlearn so much of 400 years of enslavement. So it makes sense that it would be written in such a way, or God would have it written in such a way that would communicate to them, God created everything. He alone is God. There's not multiple. He alone created everything and is in control of everything. That's the basic premise of that chapter.
Yeah.
Is God created everything and he's in control.
Yeah.
And he's intentional. And so that would tell the Hebrews, like, give them comfort, like, okay, he's the one who's in control. He took us out of slavery. That's good. I'm trying to think where I was going with that. I
can ask a question.
Yeah.
As a response, I would say to your first objection to it being to being literal, or no, your objection to it being not literal. You said about
the Sabbath.
Yeah, God making it a Sabbath, right, and wanting to prove a point of, or at least show the Israelites, hey, you should have a Sabbath.
Right.
I would say, or I'd ask you, can God show them that they should have a Sabbath if it's not literal? You know what I mean?
Yeah, he could.
If it's a story,
right,
like whether it's poetic or not, could he, in this poem, show them that they should still have a rest?
I think he could, but if it didn't have any meaning for God, he could have also just commanded them. He didn't tell them a story on how to have the 10 Commandments. He just said, here's the 10 Commandments. And one of them is keep a Sabbath day. And holy because of, and it goes into the reasoning. Yeah. But what I really think about is I don't think it necessarily has to be either or. I don't think it has to be either literal or either
I love this
symbolic.
Opinion,
right? And what I want to say before I go any further is I do think God literally created everything, obviously. That's not what we're debating. I do think God literally spoke it into existence because that's what it says. The question that's in context is like, the how of it. Did he literally do it in 7 days? Did he do it in 24 hours?
I've been thinking about this all day.
Yeah. And so it's not necessarily like we're saying a Big Bang happened, but God had created the Big Bang and then evolution happened. It's not like that. We're saying like God literally spoke everything to existence in the way that it says, but we're just saying how it played out. Is that a literal or figurative thing to send a message? Yeah. Right? And so the idea of it can be both maybe. Like God is sovereign. God knows how these cultures are going to form. So he could have literally done it exactly how it says and how the 24-hour day thing plays out. Maybe that's just some hidden knowledge that we don't know yet to say like, we don't know how God did it 24 hours if the day wasn't created yet, but he's God, so he doesn't have to give us a reason why. That's not the best argument in my opinion. It just kind of is a cop-out to explain it in my opinion. But God could have literally done it in 7 literal 24-hour periods and known that the cultures around them were going to have these systems in place to explain creation. And so when it's written, it could be symbolic of what God's communicating and literal of what happened because God knows these cultures before they came into existence because he created them.
It could even be the antithesis of that, right? The opposite. It could be that God created it in not a literal 7 days, but communicated it literally so that they would get the concept of a Sabbath, right? So it could have been that he created it. I'm stammering a lot, but what I just said. Right? Yeah. That he created it with like the appearance of age over a long period of time, and it wasn't an actual like 7 days, but he wrote it and communicated it in a style that people would know, okay, whether we have a 7-day week and on one of these days we rest. So they would take it literally, but it doesn't mean that God created it necessarily literally.
And what I think is really cool about the idea of God resting, like you don't see that in any other creation accounts of the people around him. Yeah. Like the Assyrians, I'm pretty sure were culture at the same time. I know the Egyptians were for sure there. These other cultures did not have their gods resting. They were always working to sustain it. Or like the god, when the sun went down, he was always fighting and then dying and resurrecting and fighting and dying and resurrecting. Yeah. Right? And the dad was always separating the kids. Like all these gods were always working to sustain the universe. And the God of the Hebrews says, I rested. Like I created, I set in place, and I rested. Meaning that he's ultimate. He's powerful. He's stronger. He's not worried about it. Yeah. And that's what it sends to the Hebrews is like, God is sovereign and in charge, and you can take comfort in that. Because they just got taken out of slavery and introduced to this God that they haven't really been following. And so they need to have some assurance as to why they can follow him.
Yeah.
And so what this would have told the Hebrews is, our God's reliable. Our God is capable of taking care of us. Our God's not anxious and distracted by taking care of the universe. He can see us. So, and that's what it should say to us too. We should have the same mentality. We should see it in the same way, like, God can take care of me. He's not stressed. He's not anxious. Therefore, I don't have to be either.
Yeah.
And that's a huge thing to remember, is like, we don't have to let this argument take away from the message it's telling us.
Yeah.
That God is sovereign, God's in control, and he cares. That's essentially all it's telling you. And if that's all you want to take away, that's all you need to take away. It does not matter whether it's literal or symbolic.
Yeah.
I feel the same way as you do, or it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, God didn't write it as a scientific explanation of the universe.
Right. But
That's
bro,
not what the Bible is not a scientific book.
I've only read 12 science books then, if I haven't read
Well,
Genesis
yeah,
isn't one.
it's not a science book, bro.
Dang it.
Sorry. Proverbs is.
I've only read 12. Oh, I read 13 now.
Song of Solomon is anatomy.
Oh, heck yeah, it's science. So I read 14.
Just kidding.
Nice.
But yeah, so it's like, at the end of the day, it's not written for the purpose of explaining the scientific nature of the universe.
Yeah.
It's written to communicate that God's in charge and he's not threatened and he can be trusted.
Yeah.
And that message can be given to us, and we can say, okay, cool. And that's basically where I would say, kind of have to stop.
Yeah.
You can say, oh, but it has to be literal because this, but you can't say that, really.
You can make an assumption.
You can decide that that's what you want to believe if it helps you, and that's no problem. But you can't say that's the reason it was written, to give a literal account, because
Yeah.
it wasn't. It has
According
a
to
message.
not almost all, but like a large portion of the Bible scholars, that's
Yeah.
not what it was written.
So maybe I just showed my cards. I don't really think it's super. It can be literal. I won't be upset. But
Mhm.
if it's not, I'm also not going to be upset.
Yeah.
It has a message that's sending that we can receive.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
I'm going to lose 0 friends over this opinion.
I might lose 2.
Because it doesn't matter a lot to
I
me.
might lose 2, maybe 3 friends.
No, like the thing
Just
is,
kidding.
to me, like I don't care enough to like debate that to lose any friends over it. You know what I
No, but
mean?
I'm just saying I know my friends' strong opinions, and if I tell them I disagree, they'll be like, oh. Actually, they're good friends. They're not going to stop being
No,
my
they're not
friends.
gonna care, dude.
I love them.
cares?
They love me. We're all like really close, and so they're just like, "Oh, you're wrong." But we also disagree on so much more. But it's so much fun. I was FaceTiming him. He's like, "I noticed you kept liking everyone's comment. You'd like mine, and then this person, then mine." He's like, "Whose side are you on?" And I was like, "That's purely just for the algorithm to generate more popularity.
That's so
get
funny.
likes and comments. It promotes it." So
You know what I noticed, and this is not on topic at all, but is that whenever you post one of those things, there's like a like or 2 likes, and there's like 50 comments. And I'm like, ain't no one liking this thing before the comment.
Nope, they're too busy distracted. I also posed a question, is death fixed? Which we could also talk about later, but maybe not.
Yes.
A lot of people were confused by that. One person said, nope. Or they're like, I said, is death fixed? And they said, yep, Jesus fixed it. And I was like, that's such a good answer.
There's always at least someone at the beginning of your post that cracks a joke that I always love.
I know. I'm
Yeah.
like, praise God. I love it. But yeah, so to recap everything, whether or not you want to believe in Genesis 1 creation count as literal or figurative, you are allowed to make or symbolic, you are allowed to make your decision based on study and make sure it's intellectual study, not just your preconceived notions trying to fit in the idea. But know that the message it's sending is that God is large and in charge, and
Yep.
he's going to take care of his people, and he can be trusted. And then live with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all I have for you today.
Nice.
On that.
Go check us out on YouTube. Follow our Instagram. We always have great discussions with people in the DMs. We also want to start having better discussions with people in the comments of stuff.
Yeah,
We
comment
post.
on
We try to
everything.
post twice a week. We're trying to do that more. We're getting lots of subscribers giving us money, so we're going to start putting out some merch and stickers, and hopefully be able to pay for some more ads to get some more people listening.
Yeah.
Whoa!
Yeah.
So the more money we get, we're spending all the money on making the podcast bigger and getting people out there to listen more. So really, would you send it to our demographic, our audience? Send it to the youth groups. Send it to the kids you know, the young adults you know, the people that are asking these questions, that are searching for truth.
Your science teacher who could be an atheist.
Yeah, let them know. We want to have these conversations for them and even with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be super fun.
Yeah, give us ideas of what you guys want us to talk about next. We always love those ideas. We have a doc full of like 50 things we can talk about, but we want to know like what you guys want to hear about, what like deep questions you have and things that are like stumping you up, making you trip up. So send us those DMs and we'll try to answer your questions. We'll do
Yeah.
another question and answer one here pretty soon.
Yes, we will. All right. With that, have a great week. Enjoy your Wednesday.
Yep.
And drink some coffee.
Yeah. Adios, amigos.